Good evening, everybody. I will call to order the City Council meeting for September 23rd, 2024. Ms. Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Simpson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Ferre.
Here.
Councilmember Piper. Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
All right. I will accept a motion to excuse Councilmember Pfeiffer.
So moved.
I will accept a motion. Oh. So thank you. Councilmember, you have to vote, or you have to still vote. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That passes 6-0. Councilmember Pfeiffer is an excused absence. We have two workshops this evening. The first will be our 2025-2026 proposed city manager's budget presentation. Turn it over to acting city manager, Linda Haley.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Good evening, City Council. So I'm going to kick us off with just a few introductory slides, but the real discussion will come with our finance director, Brian Archer. He's truly the expert, so you'll want to talk to him more than me. But I do want to acknowledge that our leadership team is here as well. So all of us are here. I want to thank them all for their leadership and their collaboration during this budget process. We're here to serve as a way to answer any questions that you may all have, and if there's anything specific, they're here and available for you as well. Okay? A real high-level overview of our 2025 budget process calendar. All this started in January of 2024, and as you can see, we've been going through methodically through each month. We're now currently at the September timeframe, where we're presenting to you our proposed budget with the hope that you'll support and approve it in October, and then you'll see how everything else shakes out for the year. The themes that we focused on as we went through this budget process are here for you. Brian will point to this a little bit later in the slide deck, but as you can imagine, the requests that we received from our departments this year far outnumbered the amount of revenues that we have available to fund. It's a constant source of challenge for us, one that we manage to work through on a year-by-year basis, but looking at the priorities and how we're just determining the proposed budget that we're presenting to you this evening, we really wanted to make sure that we're addressing City Council priorities in your City Council strategic plan. We also prioritize those mandatory needs to address some funding for new laws, regulations that are in place that we must respond to. We also have critical needs for some failing and or end-of-life systems that we're prioritizing fundings for, maintaining current needs of the CIP, and then maintenance of a competitive total compensation package for our employees. All of this with the lens of ensuring that we're prioritizing long-term financial stability and financial resiliency. And these are just a few of the priorities among that we have in your City Council strategic plan. These are three that stand out to us as it relates to our budget considerations and the decisions that we're asking you to make as we move forward with these recommendations. You know, having full awareness that these three identified priorities that you've talked about, the first one being identifying and utilizing new sources of potential revenue and funding to continue delivering efficient and effective services for our economic growth. We want to ensure that we continue to close the infrastructure deficit and address funding gaps for the sustainability of our community. And we need to expand our efforts to coordinate services and support those that are experiencing homelessness while also seeking long-term solutions to this critical issue. All of these are challenges, and as we're looking at these budget considerations, we have those in mind. As you can appreciate, we know having these in mind, it makes it very difficult to look at funding new sources or new requests. But we feel confident about the presentation that we're giving to you this evening and the requests that we are going to make in alignment with your goals and with the assurance that we're trying to remain fiscally responsible and financially resilient. So with that, just a very quick overview. I know you all received the budget book. I think Brian has his copy for us all tonight. The copy of the proposed budget is also on our website. And for reference purposes, our total 2025 budget appropriation is $366,624,299. Of that, the general fund consists of almost $129 million. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brian now, and he will finish the presentation with you. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Archer.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Haley. So to reiterate what Ms. Haley said, this budget's really about keeping the lights on. You will notice there's very few new programs in any of our requests. Most items are either maintaining the service levels we have today or trying to expand programs that were started in prior years. And so to continue this high-level look, we were able to fund about $4.6 million of requests. Of that, $1.8 million come from our enterprise. So these are areas where people pay user fees to get the services that are provided. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in the next workshop. But this is your water, wastewater, stormwater, solid waste, and golf predominantly. We ended up with a little more than $21.4 million worth of unfunded requests. And again, that is an annual number. So if you take that over our 10-year model, you're talking about quite a large number. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, with the 21 million unfunded requests, is that the same number as last year? Is that what you're saying? Like we had 21 million last year we also didn't fulfill, or we're a different number? Is it a different number this year?
It's a little bit different because we were able to fund some items during last year's budget process, and there were additions to that, and then we did make some adjustments for inflation. However, the numbers are actually eerily close to each other.
Thank you.
There are 4 new positions proposed. We'll talk a little bit about that. I really want to say it's really 3, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. And all of our 10-year models balance. So taking what Ms. Haley just said, we're still using the framework around a 2-year budget and a 10-year financial plan, and we're still using council's budget and fiscal policy that states that we need to be balanced in each of those years. I do want to report we are presenting a parks fund that is not balanced, and it does not balance starting in 2032. We'll dive into that a little bit more. We certainly don't want to be there, but we feel like because it's not balanced until what is the 8th year, we have time to work on that.
Mr. Archer, I have a quick question on this one. So all the 10-year models balance, but that is at existing service levels? Because we talk frequently about how roads is consistently falling behind.
That is correct. That would be at existing service levels. That would not include any of the unfunded requests.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So diving in really briefly about our number 1 priority, which is our people, and what we're going to do with our pay plan. So right now in the model, we have a proposal that anybody who's eligible for steps will receive their steps. Not everybody is eligible because many of our employees are topped out. However, the overall average for the organization is about 1.75% change. We are proposing what we call a market rate at 3%. That is across the board. If you remember in prior years, sometimes we had different market rates for different areas. Specifically, the most common area was around sworn officers. We are asking to put a hold on that for now and revisit that in April of next year to see what the market is doing. Right now, it is changing rapidly, and it's varying from organization to organization. And so we don't want to put a number out there and get caught. And so there'll be a deeper dive on that when Gabrielle and her team come back to you on October the 14th, but just giving you a heads up.
Councilmember Ferre.
So the MRA, all employees don't include sworn positions?
It does include sworn
does.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. They will receive 3% as well.
I just want to also acknowledge this is the first time the police are paying attention to our presentation back there.
She's got you there, guys.
Hopefully,
Councilmember Marriott.
Hopefully I still get out of here.
Mr. Archer, I have a question for you. I have the book, like you do. And on page 70 of the book, it shows 2023 actual expenditures, revenues and expenditures. And it has personnel actual expenditures of somewhere around $86.5 million. It's on page 70. And then the 2024 revised shows that same expenditure at like $96 million. It's a really big change. That's a 12% change or something like that. Can you speak to why there's such a large change there, and I realize we're not done with 2024
Yep.
yet. We're still in 2024, so we don't know what it's actually going to be. But does that suggest that there will be a large unspent allocation there that becomes a one-time fund, or what exactly
Sure.
is there with such a
So
giant
there's multiple
difference?
things going on there. We had a market rate change in 2024, which would be an increase over the 2023 budget. We had large vacancies in 2023. And the other difference is what you're looking at is when we budget for our salaries, we budget 100% for all positions. And then we put a vacancy savings on that. And so what you see in the 2024 is that number, 100% for all positions minus the vacancy savings. If it is greater than that, then we would have additional one-time savings that we would bring to all of you at the end of the year. We also had larger vacancies in 2023 than we're experiencing in 24. And so the combination of all of that narrows that gap a little bit.
Okay. Do you have any, prediction? We're 9 months, eight months in. How accurate is that $96 million number going to be?
It's going to be high. We're going to have some savings for sure. Yeah. Ultimately, if you remember, we're already spending some of those dollars to offer our police officers a retention bonus. And so that's using roughly 900,000 of that number. If I had to guess today, I would guess we'll probably have an additional 3 million of savings.
Right, okay. And then, going forward then to the 2025 budget, which is what we're talking about now, we've got that budgeted at $106 million. So again, another 10%, more than 10% up. What is it that makes, we're looking at steps and MRAs of 3% and 1.5%. Where does that get a fully a 10% net,
So you
expense
have
difference?
additional positions that are built into that number. So what you're looking at here, I'm assuming you're giving me the all-in number across all funds.
Correct.
And so you have additional positions that we talked about that make up some of that number.
Right.
You have changes in benefits that make up some of that number. And then you have, again, 100% of all the positions that are budgeted making up the rest.
Okay. And given that we're budgeting for 2025 here, will that 2025 budget number, will we adjust that before we adopt that budget based on the reality of 2024? Or we think
No, because you're being presented that number
tonight?
tonight,
Yeah,
and you'll
right.
adopt it on the 21st. We won't know 2024's history until we close the books in March, and then we would adjust after that.
Right, okay.
So as part of that calendar that Linda showed earlier, that's when we would make that revision.
Right.
And then we would carry that revision throughout our model. And that's actually part of the way that we were able to fund some of the items that we funded in this cycle, is making those adjustments.
Right, okay. I understand how the process works. I guess just commentary in this particular year, the magnitude of those differences is eye-opening. It caught my eye the minute I looked at that chart. And I understand we want to, budget our revenues conservatively and our expenses, not as conservatively we want to have, and that margin in there gives us, a conservative margin by which we're in a bigger safety zone. But at some point, when the differences get so vast, there is the opportunity cost that gets missed there when you've got money just carried forward, within the system that really doesn't get deployed because it's always kind of in float, if you will, kind of, and at what point do those things, ideally you would zero them in each year and still maintain that conservative thing, but this just seems like a big magnitude of difference.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We work each year to adjust our vacancy plug that we put in there with our HR department, and that's a little bit of a art more than it is a science. And the increases look dramatic. However, we did revise 24s with our information from 23, and so we're kind of playing catch up a little bit because we've been so far behind with our vacancies. And so as we move forward, hopefully that won't look that way.
All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. We were going to speak to healthcare, so we are proposing no change to our medical plan. That's the 6th year in a row. However, we are going to see an increase to our medical plan of about 8%. Fortunately, the city has saved some money in our medical trust, and we're going to deploy those dollars in 2025 to reduce that increase to both the city itself and to our employees. And so we're trying to blend that out a little bit. We feel like working with our advisor, our benefits advisor, that we've got a little too much money in the trust, and so we want to put it back to use. And so that saves some dollars there. So speaking to what you were just talking about, Councilmember Marriott, we're doing that on the benefit side. So jumping into the positions, as we spoke earlier, there's 4 new positions. I'm going to say it's really 3 because we have a senior probation officer whose funding ended or will end at the end of this year, but we really feel strongly that we need to keep this position in our organization, and so we're proposing using the opioid funds that we've received to fund that through the rest of the model. We do get the opioid funds in kind of weird tranches, and so there'll be a little bit of balancing with this, but there will be enough funds to fund this for the next 10 years. So that's why I'm saying 3, because this is not a new position, but from a funding perspective, it is. We are looking to add an HVAC specialist. We'll talk about why here later on under our buildings fund. And then you'll notice on the right-hand side, 4 positions proposed in our utilities, but 2 will not start till 2026, assuming approval, and 2 to start next year in our stormwater fund.
Mr. Archer, quickly, I know the intention behind the opioid funds is specifically for mitigation of the harms done by opioids in our communities. Does this position have a direct correlation? For instance, is it a drug probation, or do they work with individuals in that way?
The answer is yes. It's actually
Great.
a position that has been approved by our state, and it is one that's specifically called out in our agreement. And
Okay.
so we feel very strongly that we will continue to get support for it.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, jumping into a high-level look at the proposed budget line items. And to save you the pain of going through all the line items, we're going to try something a little bit different this time. So you can all follow along if you want to know the details. They're on page 63. We summed them up. And so you can see here's our 5 work system areas, and the funding is in each area. It's a little bit different way to look at it because it's not by fund. Okay, this is in total, if that makes sense. So, for example, when we talk about infrastructure, infrastructure spans many funds. It doesn't just span the general fund. So high-level look at all of that. And again, you will notice this is really about maintaining current service levels, keeping the lights on. So in our community and economic development infrastructure, work system, $31,000, really, this is supplies, some dues, and some licenses that have increased in costs, and they weren't able to absorb those inside of their fund.
Quickly, Councilmember Marriott?
I'm done.
So the question I have, I read through, and actually I like this list format of showing all the additions. The thing that I was quite taken from it, however, was that, there's a column there for the cost or the reduction in cost, and I didn't count how many, but there's a lot of costs. There's 1 reduction in cost and lots and lots and lots of cost. I'm actually kind of surprised at that from last year to this year, that everything the city's doing is we're doing the best we can, and in some places we need more, and I understand that, but there's no place where we could do less. And I'm surprised, I guess I'm just a little surprised at that, given the extensive size of this list. And I realize some of this comes out of enterprise funds, so it's not all coming out of the general fund. I mean, it comes from a bunch of places. It's the whole thing. But it would seem to me that and maybe it wasn't used as an opportunity to look down here and where could we trim?
Yeah, actually what we did not include in this was the reallocation of items. And so as part of the budget process, we ask our team to reallocate dollars in areas that they either have savings, to your example, and need to then put it to other items. That's part of our process, but we don't include that in what's presented to you. If that's something council would like to see, we're more than happy to share that with you. But that is why you don't see a ton of reductions in here, because, like, for example, in my area, we can get a lot of our training done online, and so we're able to reduce our training costs, but we're behind on our professional services. So we took training dollars and moved it over to professional
Right.
services, but that's not reflected here.
Got it. So I wouldn't want you to do a bunch of extra work that's meaningless. If that was easy, I would love to see that, just to see, you know, in my organization, we spend more on some things, we spend less on some things from year to year, and watch it very, very closely. And I would love to see it here, but I don't want to see an employee
appreciate you.
spend days crafting a list that's only important to me, so.
We can get the ones that were very easy to you.
Yeah, if it's super easy, I think it would show a more complete picture than this did. This was surprising to me, actually.
Okay, moving into our infrastructure work system, you will notice some areas here should be very familiar to you. And under the public works, you'll notice again, keeping the lights on, gas, electricity, trash. Under streets, we did take the council budget and fiscal policy direction to continue to put money towards our transportation needs. And so we added an additional $400,000 starting in 2025, and that grows by $50,000 per year. Some numbers on that. We're now at a little over $13.6 million, assuming approval of this budget, in our streets program. You will notice that's still significantly far away from what we need to be. I do want to reflect since 2016 when we asked for the additional sales tax and that was turned down. At that point in time, we were putting $6.3 million. So we're more than double in the past 9 years, well, past 8 years on those dollars. So we have taken a significant amount of our increases and pushed them over there. Our buildings activity, a little over $1 million. You will remember that we went through a process to identify all of our buildings and their long-term maintenance needs, short-term and long-term maintenance needs. And this is a step in the direction of funding those. You will see here in a little bit, that's only a third of what we need. And then the next 4 items are all in our enterprise funds, and Sharon and her team have done a wonderful job presenting that to you all over the past year. This is a reflection of what is currently in the budget book. So if you make changes to that, either increasing fees or decreasing fees, it will have effect on these. If you keep the budget book the way it is, these items will get funded. If we move to OSE, you will notice relatively small numbers. The one that probably jumps out at you is our computer fund. That is our internal computer fund, our internal service funds. This is not IT, the operations, getting money. This is us supporting all of the items you see here and all the items you don't see. So radios, cybersecurity, email security, records management, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. And then on the legal side, I do want to say $100,000 of that is to implement our safety program that has been in process for many years now, and this is just getting them across the finish line there. And so while some of these fall under these various categories, they're not necessarily their budgets. Moving over to Safe Community, you will notice the probation officer that we've been talking about. You also notice on the police side, very limited increases. And these are all from our third party, so these are being passed on to us. And I can hear Councilmember Pfeiffer saying in my head, what does VOI stand for? So that stands for Victim Outreach Incorporated. And so PD is really looking internally. Councilmember Marriott, to your point, they were one of the largest groups that looked internally and reallocated funds.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Yeah, I'm looking in the budget book here on page 68. And sorry if this is on the next slide, but there's $257,000 increase for costs for JeffCom. And I just want more detail as to what that is.
Yeah, so thank you. That was a placeholder. When we put together the budget, JeffCom was going to ask for an increase. They decided not to. So while that's in here, those dollars will not be used moving forward. Nice catch. Thank you.
And so those are part of dollars that will be somewhere else?
They'll roll back into their plan.
Okay.
And then if Linda and Ed and the team decide to reallocate those dollars, we'll bring them back to you for that. But once this is done, it'll just be added back into their 10-year model.
Okay, thank you.
And then on the VCN side, this is predominantly parks and golf. You'll notice, again, with parks, keeping the lights on, we're talking about supplies, training, some on-call. And then on the golf side, they've seen a significant growth in rounds and in people attending events, and then also people going to the restaurants. And so we've had to increase the operations budget to support the revenue coming in. And then they are now, for the first time in a while, in a positive fund balance in their 10-year model. And so they're going to put those dollars back into some capital needs. And so the number one capital need for them was a bunker replacement project out at Westwood. So bunkers are supposed to be replaced every 20 years. And the golf course was built 30 years ago. And so they're starting that. And they have, as we'll see here in just a minute, a whole bunch more that they want to work towards. But they didn't want to budget for that without continuing to see this growth. So if this growth pulls back, then they would not do future capital projects. So that's the really high-level look at the ongoing requests. Any questions I can answer? Or the team can answer? Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I was just still thinking and processing. So the previous slide about the golf line there. So just to be clear, that my understanding is that, as I've heard you explain before, I believe, is that the revenue that comes into our golf program that is designed to pay for those expenses like this. And so while this is showing up as $639,000, that is paid for by the revenue of what's coming into the golf program.
You are correct.
Okay. So it's not like we're having to pull it from the general fund somewhere else, but it's coming from that program.
That is correct.
Thank you.
We do have a few one-time items that we wanted to call out to you all, very specifically around homelessness, emergency management, and DEI and A. As Linda made reference early on, City Council had put those priorities in your plan, and these are dollars that we're putting towards figuring out how to implement some of these items. And so while these will not fund a plan and they will not fund the ability for staff to create change under each of these, it will give us the flexibility to hire help if we need help and develop those plans. If it's decided to move forward with certain items, we would be back to City Council on how we would fund them. So I just want to make you aware that's what those dollars are for. We do have a need in our tax increment to help offset some Jeffco needs. And then in our water and stormwater funds, some very small one-time requests to help replace some aging equipment that aged a little faster than we were expecting, and then some security that is needed at some of our different facilities, specifically our treatment facilities. So that is our current proposed City Manager 2025-2026 budget requests. Before I get out of your way tonight, I did want to spend a little bit of time on our unfunded because the team spent a long time identifying all of these. We do have this list as well. This is not in anything. However, if you'd like to see it, I know we have this one, and you can have this one anytime you like. So same structure. There's our 5 work systems, a total of about $21.4 million. Under the CED side, we had a request for help, deputy director, some software needs, and some ongoing training needs, and then ultimately some work with our economic development. Some of these items will come back to you as one-time requests. They are prioritized in our one-time list. However, we don't have those dollars yet. We have an assumption, as Councilmember Marriott said, that we will have some, but we want to finish out the year. And so while some of these are listed here, you will see them again probably in March. Maybe sooner, depending on how the year ends up. Under infrastructure, you will notice some large needs under public works, some additional positions, some help in and around Old Town, around parking, parking maintenance, hub maintenance, some temp wages. Under streets, we've talked about that. Looking like if we fully implemented concrete and asphalt, that'd be $10 million per year additional. And then under buildings, remember we talked about proposing the $1 million in this cycle. We still need $2 million more annually to fully implement our replacement cycle. And then why I put TBD under water, wastewater, and stormwater, again, this goes to what we talked about, what level you all decide on rates. And we'll hear a whole bunch more about that here in just a bit. Under OSE, you will notice we're really talking about supporting the organization. So HR is needing some help from a leave administrator. They are going to work using some of their temp dollars and being very creative to do this over a short period of time and see how we can survive, and then probably we'll be back. IT is needing additional positions to support the organization. Craig's here. I think he reminds us that we're 2 years behind in tickets at this point, that if we stopped doing tickets, it would take his team 2 years to even get caught up. And so they are truly just putting fires out. I think he reminds me of this every Friday, but I'm not sure. The CMO needs additional help, certainly around Ask Arvada and in the communications side of things. And legal is still working on right-sizing where we are with risk and what kind of effort we need there. And then they proposed a really neat law clerk intern program, something we couldn't afford. We really hope to be able to afford that in the future, but these are some of the things that the team is putting out there. Move to safe community. Under courts, we have a deputy court administrator that is also a term-limited position that ends at the end of 2025. Is that right? So the desire is to continue that position after next year. And then under PD, even though we're down a bunch of positions, if you all know, PD has a white paper that represents the amount of positions they need to keep the service levels we have today. And we've not been hiring those. Obviously, we've not been adding those positions because we're not even full yet. However, to keep up with that, we would need 13 additional positions in this cycle. And that number continues to grow every year we move forward. Under parks, as we talked about, parks in and of itself is already in a negative. However, they also would need additional help to continue to maintain the parks that are coming on. And so ongoing conversations with them, they need about 5 positions and additional help to maintain those. And then we talked about golf already. These are the next areas of golf that they would like to do. So they have a greens roller on there. They want to do some improvements to their kitchen, and then they have some capital projects outside. Built into that are some of the projects in and around Lake Arbor. They're able to do some of them, but they can't do the very large ones. So that was very fast. Any questions around the unfunded? Yes, Ms. Ambrose.
Councilmember Ambrose?
Yeah, the deep breakout list, if you could send that along, that'd be
Sure.
great.
Happy to do that. Okay, I only included 2 10-year models in this cycle. If you remember in the past, we walked through each and every one of them. I know you can't read this very well, and I apologize. It is in the book, and it does run from pages 95 to pages 123, so you can certainly look at them there. You will see when we started this year and we revised everything, our general fund had about $2.4 million at the end of 10 years. And now, as it sits, we will have about $200,000 at the end of 10 years. Now, that's $200,000 above our required fund balance goal. That's not what the city would have in the bank. The city would have $28 million in the bank at the end of 10 years, if that makes sense. And so, again, is this conservative? Absolutely. However, it does make us feel very comfortable that if we do end up in a recession or a period of slowdown, that we would still be able to offer the services our citizens and residents have come to love, and then we can work through how we would adjust as we go through the rest of the model. And then, since we talked so much about parks, just wanted to go ahead and put parks up here. And you will notice in 2032, again, parks is not out of money. They're just below their fund balance goal. They do run out of money starting at the end of 2033. And so we will have to be looking at this model as we move forward. We feel very comfortable that we can make changes in this either through cuts, reallocations, additional funding, et cetera, to make this balance over the next 2 budget cycles. So what questions can we
Councilmember Marriott.
answer?
You said you were going to mention the HVAC specialist?
Yes, so to implement the $1 million that is being added to the ongoing maintenance in the buildings funds, they need an additional resource to help do all of that. And so instead of going outside, we felt like it was better to hire a person inside, and then they could do some of those projects. So the team decided with the allocation that that would be dollars better spent.
Right, okay. So somebody's weighed the pros and cons between hiring a FTE and paying wages and benefits
Yes,
versus
hiring a contractor.
a contractor to do that. And is that viewed as a permanent
It would.
permanent FTE? So
It would be.
even once whatever the projects are get done, there's more projects. The need for that will never go away.
At this point in time, the need is at least through our 10-year cycle.
Okay.
And so we
Okay.
would have to get further down the road. If in 5 years or 8 years there's an end, then they would look to reallocate that.
And is that viewed as a hands-on guy with a bucket of tools who's actually doing stuff, or is this someone who's there to manage contracts and contractors and work to be done? And
My
that
understanding
kind
is
of thing?
both hands-on, and they would manage contracts as well.
Right, okay. So are certain things they would actually do, and
Yes.
certain things they would
Yeah,
manage?
if there's an area of expertise that's outside their window, then they would hire. But if it's something they can handle, they'll do it themselves.
Okay. Let me ask just 2 other questions, just in general, on the budget. So one of the things that, and this goes to the 24 budget probably, not the 25, in fact, it certainly does, is that we're fixing to spend somewhere near $60,000 to implement some recycling in Old Town. Where would that money come from within the current 2024 budget? Is that something where we've not done something or had a vacancy savings or just reallocated things that were already there?
Both.
Okay.
So that money's coming out of the city manager's budget, and it's both. They've not done a few smaller items, and then they have some vacancy savings because they have some positions down. So they're putting those 2 together to do that project.
Right, okay. And have we, is there going to be a time in which we, the city council, actually approves that expenditure? Because I don't believe we have in a public meeting. Am I incorrect about that?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's part of the operations of that, and so I don't know if
That's not
that was-
something that requires.
Yeah, I don't think that requires approval.
Council approval. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it. Let me ask then another question, and that's, I realize in this book, we don't have like a city balance sheet, although the 10-year model does have
pretty close.
fund balances at the bottom, so it almost does. But, we just spent $6.5 million this summer to purchase ECA.
Yes.
And, that wasn't a budgeted item either. And, I guess in my mind, we're trading one type of asset for another type of asset, cash versus this. But is that reflected in the book anywhere in anybody's fund balance, or where does that asset live? What fund does that asset live in to keep those numbers
Yeah,
to be where they are? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So the assets of a government don't sit on their budgets in any place. So that sits on our balance sheet. That's not included here.
Correct.
Yeah, so,
But
we have a
our
ledger.
10-year model does have fund balances at the bottom, which is kind of pretty close to a balance sheet.
It is, but we're not allowed to use assets in government financing
Okay,
towards fund balance. So like you'd be able to do that in the private sector, like I could say, my business is worth X.
Right.
And I could put that on my balance sheet and say, now I'm worth Y.
Right.
We're not allowed to do that here.
right. So the cash had to come out of one of these funds.
The cash came out of the general fund.
Out of
and
the
it came-
general fund.
It did. It came out of savings from 2023.
Okay. And so if we were looking at it this time last year, the projected fund balance for 2024 now is $6.5 million less than we projected then, but in here, the fund balance just shows up with what the fund balance
Yeah,
is.
that is correct.
So it kind of doesn't show up.
It does not in what you're looking at here.
Right.
The individual line items, which we can also give you if you'd like, has a budget for that purchase
Okay.
of land, and it would show as an expenditure in 2024.
Right. Do you guys, as part of your accounting procedures, do you do the equivalent of a balance sheet?
Absolutely.
Do governments do
Yep.
that? Is that something that can be provided? First I'd ask, how much detail is it? And is that something that can be provided to us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of our annual report. So the aquifer that was presented to you all, I think last week, by our auditor, it's in there. So our balance sheet would be there.
Okay,
It's going to be high level. You're not going to be able to get to the detail of where the early college Arvada property is
where
located.
any of that?
We can give you our asset detail if that's something you'd like to see.
But there's got to be some kind of accounting for it. I mean, in this particular case, it's small enough compared to the cash assets of the city that it's kind of insignificant. But if you did it 10 more times, it wouldn't be insignificant, it'd be significant. And there should be somewhere in which that lives and is apparent, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it shows up as a budgeted item in 2024. So you'll see it as an expenditure, the purchase of the piece of property.
Right.
After that, it lives in our balance sheet until we either sell it or do something with
Do
it.
something with it, right?
Yeah. And if we were to sell it, it would come back into our budget as a revenue.
Right, okay.
If we were to just keep it, like this building,
Right.
for example, we would depreciate it over time just like anybody else, and then it would retain a value.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Brian, that actually brings up a really good point. I would be curious to see a list of our assets. I know we have significant assets across the entire city, some land, some actual buildings, all kinds of things. We even have a couple of equestrian centers. So I would be really curious just to be able to see kind of a collection of the various assets we do have.
Okay?
All right,
We
thank
can
you.
get you that.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Archer, for this, this report detail. I know it costs a lot to run a household, and you've shown that through the years, the prices for things have gone up. And even homeowners and business owners have to have an increase in funding every year. So thank you for being, the city's a leader in its compensation for its employees, and that's very exciting. Part of this that is concerning to me too is our police force. We're down, and there's CALIA ramifications for our police department, and we want to make sure that we meet our levels of employees and positions in what we're doing, and then thoughtfully be able to, or actually be able to prevent crime in the city. And so I'm a very big proponent of, let's try to bolster those things. That's really important. Infrastructure. We really have to do take loving care, lasting care of our infrastructure. I mean, we have things like the North Trunk Line that's going in, that's going to prevent the sanitary sewer from burping up. But we also have to protect our drinking water and making sure that we have some of the best drinking water in the region. I think that is really important to not only council, but also to our residents and business owners here in the area. And then, all the other types of issues that it takes to run a city. We don't make widgets. So it's not like we can go out and sell more cookies or sell more tires and make more money. So some of the things that we have to do are hard, and so we are cutting into the bone, and I understand that. Right now we're in the marrow, and we want to have certain levels. We are expected of ourselves, because we dream big and deliver, certain levels of service. And I think we're doing a really great job of it. And I thank you, staff, for being very creative with your budgeting. It's easy to say from the outside that we're spending too much money, and then we realize that there are areas that we are neglecting because we really don't have enough funds. So thank you for this. Thank you, staff, for being thoughtful about your funding.
Very colorful imagery, Councilmember Davis. Thank you. I was thinking of the bone marrow. All right. I see no other lights from council. Thank you very much, Mr. Archer.
Thank you. We will
Always
get,
appreciate you and your hard work.
Yes, we will get you what you requested.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will move us into our next workshop, which is the 2025 Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Rates and Fees discussion. Welcome up Director of Utilities, Sharon Israel.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Welcome, Ms. Israel.
Thank you. We are here for, I think, our fourth workshop in 2024 to talk about water, sewer, and stormwater enterprise funds. You'll remember from our last workshop in August that we had provided a few different options for the council to consider. And so this evening, we're bringing back some more details. We've got some responses to some of the questions and comments the council provided in the last workshop. We really appreciate that. You should be getting, did everybody just get a handout? Okay, handouts are coming from Kristen. I want to point out that slide 33 in the original packet had some math errors in it, and I really apologize for that. You're going to get a handout of the corrected version with a strikeout with the new numbers. And then the slides that we're presenting this evening, that slide 33 has been corrected in what you're going to see. So if you have any questions about it when we get to that point, please let me know. It doesn't impact any of the rate option scenarios that we're talking about. It's just sort of a list of different categories of numbers.
Much appreciated. Ms. Israel, will you do me a favor? I've had a few different constituents reach out to me this week asking questions about this because they saw it they saw both budget and water and they weren't able to put it together. So just for the viewer's education, would you be able to explain what an enterprise fund is?
Absolutely. Let's get started with that. So an enterprise fund is kind of like a government-run business. And so what that means is that it's established to perform certain functions or services for the city. We collect fees or rates, rate revenue to cover the cost of those functions. So we can't use water rates to do anything other than provide water-related services. We can't use our sewer rates to provide anything other than sewer-related services. Extending that, we can't use anything from stormwater rates other than stormwater-related services. So another enterprise fund that you've heard our team talk about in the past is waste hauling. That is another enterprise fund. So again, we can't take the revenue we receive for waste hauling fees and use it for anything else. So that's why we talk about enterprise funds this way, is that when we talk about water revenue, which we're going to be doing again this evening, I want to emphasize we really just turn that money back around and reinvest it in the system, use it for staffing, use it for cover our costs.
Perfect. So in a sense, water rates pays for water, general fund does not pay for water, and water does not pay for general fund.
That's exactly right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks for the question. So we will review quickly the timeline that we've been on. We will recap the discussion from August 26th. So thanks again to all the council members for your input on that. We will review funding scenarios, kind of doing a deeper dive into some of those options that you heard about August 26th. Tonight, we are really hoping to get a clear direction from the council on what you'd like to see us bring October 7th for a first reading of an ordinance. So we've kind of been working toward that all year. What that would set us up is October 7th first reading, and then October 21st second reading, and then that October 21st date would also be a public hearing on this topic. So if we're able to get that clear direction from the council this evening, we can stay on that schedule, and then we'll know what numbers to put into that ordinance that we would bring to you, again, on that October 7th date. We also have just a wrap-up of some of the good conversation I think we had earlier this year and into August about assistance programs. I know that's been a topic of interest among the council, and again, what October looks like. So this slide might be familiar to you by now. So on April 8th, we kicked off the sort of season of enterprise fund discussions and talked about why and how do we do this rate setting, what enterprise funds are all about. In July, we covered some of that and also asked for some policy direction. Specifically, we were asking the council at that time, you'll remember, on whether there's a comfort level to include bond issuances as part of our rate discussions this year. As we talked about in August, all of our options right now do include a bond issue of at least some amount to cover especially capital reinvestment expenses. So again, in August, we talked through some options. Tonight, we're going to dig a little deeper into those options. And again, first and second readings being next month. So I'm going to hand it over to the Utilities Business Manager for the city, Christine Gray. And Chris, as you may recall, is an expert in all these things, and she's going to take it from here. Chris?
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening. All right, so as we've done in previous workshops, we'll go through a recap of some questions and comments that you all had before, and we've organized them by theme. So the first one is, please show existing and proposed new debt service for any debt issues, and we will show that in slides that are forthcoming. Most of the answers to these are, we will show you this in slides that are forthcoming, so bear with me. On the revenue side of the picture, yes, be prepared for revenue fluctuations in the financial model. And if you recall, we talked about our existing financial model looks at one previous year for forecasting future revenues as far as consumption goes. We're going to change that to an average so that it's a better picture of what our customers use to help us look at future forward revenues. We are planning to keep our tiers as they are for now, and then we will also research some surcharge options for high water users and use that revenue for supporting conservation programs. That was something that Councilor Foray mentioned in our conversation with her last week, and so thank you for that comment. And that's something that we can look at in future modeling discussions, probably starting in 2026. And then show revenue and expenses for each scenario, which we will do. For bonding and or loans, yes, Councilor Marriott, I think we've talked about this a number of times. We'll work with our organizations to see if we can offer bonds to our residents. All of our scenarios where we can afford it will include some amount of bonds. So we'll talk through some stormwater scenarios that cannot afford bonds, but the sewer and the water funds both include bonds. And then your comment was that future councils will appreciate the appropriate use of debt now. And so we incorporated that to the best of our ability. For the scenario options themselves, that bottom line slide that we showed last time, and we're showing it again in this presentation, is the amount in addition to current bills. So if we fully funded all of the different funds, that is the additional amount that we would see. And we'll see that in a future slide. A reminder that households do use different amounts of water. I think Councilor Pfeiffer spoke to that at the last workshop. Our model uses a baseline of 95,000 gallons a year, and that includes irrigation for what we would call a typical single-family home. And then per your request, we did include some historic rates for further back in time for some context.
Councilmember Foray.
Thank you. The 95,000 gallons a year, is that for a family of 4, assuming, or what family dynamic would that
Generally, a family of 4 with a lot size that is typical for a house built in the 70s or 80s.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There is a slide in the water fund section that talks about what the bill impacts would be for 2 different scenarios for different types of water use, everything from 75,000 gallons to 300,000 gallons. So you can get a different picture of what that means. Okay. Continuing on, a number of points underneath our CIP one-pager and projects section. So we had a discussion at the last workshop about the replacement of our existing Arvada water treatment plant. It is aging, it needs to be replaced. That is in our one-pager document that we handed out and attached to the presentation. The mayor, I believe, asked what options we have with that property as we move forward, and so we will take a look at what revenue we can get from that property, whether it's, I'm not sure we can sell it, but if we can lease it or have some other business on that property, we'll take a look at what those options are. The current one-pager does reflect our current best information from master plans. So there was a comment in the last workshop about the fact that out years in the 2030s, that CIP does really reduce in amount, looking at $3 to $5 million maybe for the water fund. We have a very good picture right now of what we need for each of those funds, stormwater, water, and sewer, in the 5 to 7 year range. And while we do have some placeholders for out years, we are consistently redoing our master plans every handful of years so that we have the latest and greatest information. So while I won't say that we're going to have huge increases in out years, next year when we come back to you as a part of this process, those CIP numbers for out years, those 2032, 3, 4, and 5, will be probably larger than what they are now. Looking into the future, we will also examine a pumped zone surcharge. And then you asked us to be aware of and prepare for and manage construction fatigue around the city as we implement all these projects. It can be really difficult to get north and south, east and west when there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're very aware of that as we have to drive that ourselves. So we will work with our communications teams and our project teams. As a reminder, the sewer capital program is a combination of both repair and replacement and growth. So all of those projects you'll see on that part of the one-pager need to stay married, so to speak. We can't peel out R&R and only do R&R. Those projects are helping us meet our planned development by a certain timeline, and since we're in there upsizing to accommodate growth, we are also replacing lines that need replacement. And then finally, level of service impacts. The costs of sanitary sewer overflows are about $35,000 per overflow, and that's just a reminder of why we have those projects in the sewer capital program. Our risk folks have said that that's because more people have finished basements, and when they're going in to replace things and repair things, they have to deal with asbestos. So those costs are increasing on a regular basis. I will take an informal poll from you to see if you want us to come back in a future workshop and talk about the capital work that we've completed to date. We've asked our customers, our residents, to pay more for their rates. We've done a lot with what they've provided to us, and we can certainly pull together something that shows you more than just one slide like we did last time, what we've been doing. So I'll kind of...
Councilmember Furray?
I think that if we have that public facing and available to the public, that's great, but I don't think there's another need for a future workshop. I want to give some space to other, maybe some other departments as well, to do workshops. But I think it's very valuable to show where that's going in a public facing format, like online, social media, and websites.
Okay. Anyone else have a thought here? Go. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I would like to see that too, and if it is public-facing, that's great. I don't think it needs another workshop, but it would be valuable information.
Yep. Okay. I like the idea of having it public-facing, and perhaps it could be included when this naturally comes back up again. When we look at this next year, we could have, obviously, maybe more than one slide. We don't need an entire workshop, but we could run through the highlights as well as have the list of the major projects and what they've accomplished for our ratepayers.
All right, and we have a transparency page, so we can put that information on that site so that kind of ties in with what we're doing with the funds that we're receiving from our customers.
Excellent. And then if there are any sort of significant projects, it might be worth featuring in the Arvada report. I certainly think our team should brag on itself sometimes.
Okay. And for our last follow-up slide, pretty sure that's the last one, yes. Stormwater. So we are scheduling a Stormwater 101 type workshop for you in the first quarter of 2025 to cover the basics. We have 3 major components of the program: operations, regulatory, and engineering. We'll speak to that in a little bit on those slides. But this 101 workshop will include an update on everything from what is stormwater, what are the projects we're working on right now, how does Mile High Flood District play into our funding sources. Speaking of Mile High, we should, as you have directed us, and we do use Mile High Flood District funds wherever possible. In fact, in this year alone, we have $650,000 from them that we are allocating towards some capital projects and $450,000 towards some maintenance projects. So we are working with them. And as Mr. Archer mentioned in his presentation, we are requesting 2 FTE in 2025 for stormwater operations. This would include proactive inspections and maintenance, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the stormwater section, but again, it is to help us peel out a stormwater team from everybody racing to do locates first and then wastewater and stormwater work secondarily. For assistance programs, we will evaluate the cost and benefits of a bill roundup program. We do have funds set aside in our 25 budget for some billing system upgrades, and so we'll include that in the scope of work. And we are moving forward with a partnership with Community Table, and we'll have some more information from them at the very end of the presentation. We're also looking at using the city's existing housing rebate or resident rebate customer list as an outreach basis for sending letters asking if those customers are struggling with their utility bills. And so we have a preset group of folks that have already reached out to the city. We'll talk with them.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Thank you. One of the things that I mentioned in the last session, and maybe it's in the slides, is programs to help renters and landlords specifically. Will that be addressed?
That we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look at. That is a struggle that a lot of Front Range utilities have had. It's one thing when it's a renter who's renting a single-family home. It's a lot more difficult when it is an apartment-type situation. And so making sure that if there is some kind of assistance that the landlord passes that along to their tenant. So we want to do some research about who's doing what in the Front Range, what success they've had with anything along those lines. But yes, that's on the list.
I mean, this is a really salient issue, as I've been contacted by residents who have come to the city asking for help and have been told, well, you're a renter, so can't help you there. And then asking their landlord, the landlord's like, what, why would I, how do I even do this? So.
Councilmember Marriott.
I see that last bullet is interested in more info on liens for non-payment. The policy question I have around these assistance programs is, are you guys going to have a discussion or make decisions on shutting people's water off again sooner so they don't get so deeply in debt that they can't catch up? You know, like I know that it used to be that you got 2 months behind or 2 bills behind and your water got shut off and people could, you know, they'd have to pay their water bill, they'd have to scrape it, figure it out, but it was a small number. And now people get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars behind before they then are under threat of a lien, and it causes all these lien situations. And I mean, I still think shutting people's water off because they're not paying their trash bill is dirty pool. Like, you can't do that, but you should not let people get so in debt on their water bill. So if they're not paying their water bill, their water should get shut off, because then they fix it right away. And you probably have a lot less of this whole lien issue.
I'm looking at Sharon, and I think that's something we can definitely incorporate into our review of assistance programs going forward. And you had spoken to that when we met with you earlier this summer, so yes, we'll put that on the list. Okay. So I will transition us to the next slide, which is a repeat from before. I will also tell you this is a much shorter slide deck. It is only 54 slides. It is not 80-plus slides, so hopefully that sounds better. If we funded everything, and by everything, we're looking at the scenario that includes fully funding the CIP, that's about $13 a month additional to a current bill for a typical single-family home with summer irrigation. So that's some context to put in the back of your mind. And I will also mention that since we're talking about fully funding or funding everything, I'm going to reiterate some messaging that Brian actually had in the last presentation. Was all of the projects we're talking about and all the operational work we're doing is keeping the lights on. So we don't have any projects in this proposal for each of these 3 funds that is, wow, this would be gold plating. This is all keep our system structural, keep it sustainable, keep it reliable. One of the City Council strategic plan items is addressing and closing infrastructure gaps and funding gaps. And this, I believe, plays into that as well. We are looking at our infrastructure. We are managing the repair and replacement we need to do. We're also addressing planned development in a timely manner. And so please keep that in the back of your mind as well. So the Stormwater Fund is the last fund we talked about at the last workshop, and there were some slides missing, so I thought it was more appropriate to start with the Stormwater Fund so you could have all of that information at your fingertips to start with. We've got a few slides on basics. So our three teams protect city's waterways, address spills, help us prepare for floods and manage floods, and then administer permits for construction. Lots of data up here about how much mileage of pipeline we have, how many facilities we have. We do have 10 city-owned stormwater lakes. Some of those lakes around town in people's neighborhoods aren't for aesthetics, they are to capture stormwater drain off. We do partner with Mile High Flood District when we can to leverage their funds. And we are currently managing about 112 active construction sites. So there is a fair number of that construction going on. We also manage our city's municipal separate storm sewer permit, our MS4 permit, and that's issued to cities for discharge of stormwater to bodies of water. Continuing on with the basics, these three main work groups have 10.5 FTE in the proposed 25 and 26 budget book. That includes those 2 FTE that Brian mentioned earlier. And the Stormwater Fund also partially funds other positions in the infrastructure and the VCN work systems. And the total 2024 stormwater operations and maintenance budget is $4.1 million. So if you look at those three teams, basically the 4 people in the regulatory team are ensuring compliance with our MS4 permit. They inspect and maintain open channels and water bodies, and they do water quality sampling and air quality responses. Our operations team inspects and maintains a lot of pipeline and then responds to and repairs sinkholes and other impacts to city streets and infrastructure, and that is 2.5 existing plus the request for 2. And then our engineering team of 2 people coordinates projects with Mile High Flood District and also manages our own in-house projects. Manages our permits and our master plans and floodplain studies. And I will also acknowledge an acronym that got in without an explanation, the CRS ranking. So that's our community rating system. And that is a rating we get from FEMA. So FEMA takes a look at what cities do in their stormwater programs, how well that measures up to what is needed, and then assigns a score. According to the engineering team, most cities in the Front Range are in the 5 to 6 range out of 10. We are a 5. And so this rating system basically says this city is doing X amount in the stormwater world. The more we do as a community to prevent flooding and to increase resiliency to flooding gives us a better discount for customers from the federal government on their floodplain insurance. So when we do more, we might not reduce our residents' bills, but we're at least managing them or helping to manage those bills. So some impact photos. It's always fun to look at stuff that goes wrong to get an idea of what might go right. So on the left-hand side between the cones there is a sinkhole. We've experienced a few of those over the last couple of years. You'll see a couple of culvert pictures. The one to the right of the cones is a corrugated metal pipe, which does not stand up well to stormwater. It tends to degrade, and you can't really see it well, but in the middle of that pipeline at the ceiling, there is a hole, and you can see some sunlight coming through. So that's not what we want to have happen. You'll see another sinkhole-type cavity with the tape around it, and in the top right is a culvert with a lot of sediment and junk in it. The bottom right is another culvert, another pipeline that is not in great shape. It's been scoured and has vegetation growing in it. And then you might already be familiar with that final picture, which was a flooded out street after the floods last year. So these are the things we are trying to avoid in our stormwater fund. We've also managed a couple of hands full of spills and dumps just year to date this year. We have this slide in here to help understand or help explain what our stormwater teams are dealing with. So this is a slide titled Directional Drilling Damage or bore hits, and a couple of different graphics. So a bore is when some contractor comes in, they want to install some conduit, they don't want to either do open cut or disturb some natural area or there is a difficult area, so they go underground. And you can see that visual on the bottom left shows how they directionally drill. And occasionally damage happens. That can happen from, contractors aren't verifying where the utilities are. They're not pre-marking, all the way to they don't know that they're supposed to look for that, or they are blatantly disregarding it. And all of that has an impact to our teams. So once we find those, first we have to find them. They don't come and tell us they hit our stuff all the time. Then we have to resolve them, and then we have project delays that can be fairly significant. So on the bottom right, you can see that we are currently seeking about $200,000 in damages from 11 different contractors. And that takes time and energy for the entire city team to manage.
Does this total, is that actual cost to the city, or do we add interest to account for the time and cost?
I do not know, but I will find out.
Thank you.
Okay. And then you can see we've had 52 board hits since 2017, 7 this year to date, and 10 last year. So they are an impact to our city. This is one of the other things that takes our stormwater and wastewater teams off of what they need to be doing. So first things first, we respond to locates. Then if there's a bore hit, we have to respond to that to keep projects moving forward. And after that, the wastewater team can do their work, the stormwater team can do their work. So this is a big impact to our teams. So I will get into now the format that you saw in the last workshop, and we'll follow the similar format for each of the 3 funds. So for the capital projects for the Stormwater Fund, this is a map of the city, and you can see the red, orange, and yellow dots that represent the highly critical, the medium critical, and the low critical projects that actually have a home in the city. That's where that dot lives. For anything that is system-wide, those projects are shown in that gray box in the upper right. So we do have a handful of those. The Stormwater Fund, I think the major theme is that we've had ongoing efforts to address major projects. As a reminder, we have the color coding based on criticality, risk, and vulnerability to the system. And the red projects for 2025, those highest critical projects are the largest amount, $2.2 million. Orange and yellow follow with $176,000, and then almost $1 million for the yellow projects. So 2025 projects are about $3.4 million, and for context, the 10-year picture looks like $36 million. The consequences of not doing a project or deferring a project range from level of service impacts, that includes flooding on major streets. We've said in previous slides for the Water and Sewer Fund, there are some reputational impacts for the city, perhaps not as significantly for the Stormwater Fund, but it is hard when your business is not accessible because there's flooding right in front of it. And then for every single fund, inflationary impacts for deferred projects. So the 2025 proposed expenses, we have no debt payments right now. The city does not have any outstanding debt for the Stormwater Fund. We are proposing debt in at least one scenario. So that range of new debt would range from $0 to $600,000 in 2025. Our operating budget, which does include the 2 FTE requests, is about $4 million, and our CIP plan is about $3.4 million. So the total ranges from $7.3 to $7.9 million. We have a busy slide here, so we'll show you the 3 scenarios for stormwater. You can see on the left, going top to bottom, we have scenario A, B, and C. And then to the right of each of those scenarios are the impacts and things to consider with each of these scenarios. So starting with scenario A, a 0% increase. We do not have a fixed fee for stormwater, we just have a variable fee. If there's no increase, customers aren't going to see a change to their bill. We wouldn't see any 2025 debt or loans. We would see a 2026 issue for about $10.25 million. And to consider, while this funds 100% of the 2025 operating expenses, it only funds 8% of the CIP. So if we were going to push out the CIP to the following few years to fund that, we would need some significant rate increases to pay for all of that CIP. And the danger with very high rate increases for several years in a row is that you overcollect revenues, and we want to definitely avoid that. For scenario B, that is the budget book scenario. So right now in the budget book, you would see a 5% increase. Customers would see a $3 increase on their bill. There is that 5% increase. We would be looking at a 2026 debt issue or a loan of $11 million, followed by another $13 million over the next 9 years. And again, to consider, this funds 100% of the operating budget. It only funds 12% of the CIP. So again, deferring that CIP to out years means some higher rates, not as high as the 0% scenario, but still some higher rates. And then finally, scenario C, we call that the fully funded scenario that funds all of the 25 capital projects. You can see it's about an $8 a year increase for customers. That overall revenue increase is 13.75%. There would be a 2025 debt issue of $8.3 million with an additional $17 million in out years. So we would be staggering debt every other year, every 2 to 3 years. That funds 100% of the operating budget. It funds 100% of the 2025 and 2026 CIP. And then, just as a reminder, lower debt would require higher rates. So if we were going to bring that percentage down, we would have to see if we could increase that debt, if that were possible. So those are the 3 scenarios for stormwater. We'll go on and show you what that impact looks like for a typical single family. So we look at a typical single family as being a home that has 3,000 square feet of impervious surface. So for customers who are listening in tonight and looking at their bill, we have that on your bill, how much impervious area you have on your property. So for scenario B, which is the budget book scenario, you would see a 5% increase. For scenario C, you would see a 13.75% increase. And you can see the associated amounts for each of those scenarios. Because 2024, or because scenario A is a 0%, there's not an associated 0% increase. Thank you. And that is an annual number. Pardon me. So for some context about stormwater rates historically, and then to summarize all of the scenarios in one slide, we're showing you historic and projected stormwater rate increases from 2010 through 2034. So along the bottom axis, we have the years, and the vertical axis is an annual total revenue increase. So you'll see that black bar in the middle, and to the left of that are the increases we've had historically. So you can see we've had not very many stormwater fund increases. We had a 2% increase in 2015, another 2% increase in 2023, and then a 5% increase this year. To the right of that, you'll see in the different colors the 3 scenarios, scenario A, B, and C, and a reminder that each of those scenarios does include, to the extent we can afford it, debt to manage the increases in all out years. Another very busy slide. So we wanted to show you how revenues and expenses are offset against each other for each of the 3 scenarios. And so this shows scenarios A, B, and C. And the top table is the revenues that are coming in, and the bottom table is the expenses that are going out. So we have existing rate revenues for each of the scenarios. We have new rate revenues, and those will only show up for scenarios B and C. We have non-rate revenues, which include for the stormwater fund things like permit fees and interest. And then when there is bond issued in 2025 on that scenario C, you will see the bond proceeds plus reserve funding. So you can see the totals for each of the funds. For expenses, we have no existing debt service, and we would only have new debt service for that scenario C. We have operating expenses that remain the same across the board. We have capital improvement programs that change because we are deferring, at least in scenarios A and B, a good chunk of that amount to next year. And then we show either the use of fund reserves or a funding of. And so this represents in this fund that $24,000, that $100,000, and that $5.8 million. That is fund amount that we can put back to the fund balance.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Yes, I was wondering if you could go back to the previous slide. And it's showing historically, from 22 to 2010, no rate increases. How was the city able to do that for so long and still be able to do anything with the stormwater? And follow-up question for that, none of these scenarios have us ever getting back down to 0% rate increases.
So the stormwater fee was implemented in 2003, and we had increases then. So I believe what we have done over the past, up at least until 2010 or 2015, is lived off of the revenue that was generated from those increases. So not doing a whole lot of capital work, keeping our operating expenses pretty low. The out-year increases not going back to zero, I don't anticipate that happening. We do have a backlog of projects, so I don't know that we would get back to zero. We'll certainly see how that plays out when we go through every year of 10-year forward-looking.
Okay. And then the other thing I just wanted to note is that if we approve a 13% this year, then we can avoid a 26% increase in the following years. Okay.
Yes. So this slide just stands to show that our revenues and our expenses will match. This is a pretty busy slide as well, so I'll take a little bit of time to unpack it. We have titled it the expense cost allocation and out-year increases to fully fund the CIP. And there are 3 of these. There is one for each scenario. So you see across the x-axis all of the years, and the y-axis is a typical single-family stormwater bill. So you can see for 2024, that's about $60, $59.40 right now. You will also see across the middle of the chart a 0% increase for context. And so if we had 0% increases for the next 10 years, that's some information. So what this is telling you is that for a typical single-family stormwater bill, what parts of those 6 expenses that are listed at the bottom are being funded. So you can see with the 0% scenario in 2025, we are funding primarily operations. About 90% of that bill would be going to operations. A very small amount of it would be going towards our highest criticality CIPs, those red ones. And so you don't see any other colors beside that because those all got pushed off to the next year. 2026, we're funding some debt service because we show the need and the ability to issue debt in that year. So that purple line, or that purple color, shows a new debt. Green is operating expenses, and now we're able to pick up more of that, that high critical CIP. Only when we get out to 2029 do you see all of the colors represented, and so you can see that we are paying for debt service, operations, and all 3 red, orange, and yellow criticality CIPs. The text boxes at the top of each of those columns represents the rate increase that would be needed to fully fund the CIP. So you can see that with a 0% in 2025, we would need a 25% increase in 26, a 22% increase in 27, a 20% increase in 28, and then we get down to the single digits. And this is the scenario that with those 3 20 to 25% increases would get us into some over-collection potential in the out years. So we want to manage that. For the budget book scenario, the 5% increase, you can see that there aren't as dramatic rate increases for the out years. A 5% in 2025 would be followed up by a 13.75% increase. Again, because we're not fully funding the CIP in 2025, we're pushing off some of that into 26, so you're only seeing the red in 26. And then you can see the different colors showing up in the out years. So a much reduced profile of rate increase needs. And I'm going to stop and ask if this makes sense. There's one more slide about this, but I don't want people to be confused. There is a lot going on in this slide, so does it generally make sense? Okay. And finally, scenario C, which would be a 13.75% increase. Shows the CIP is fully funded. You can see that in '25 is the 13.75%, followed by another 13.25%, and then we get under 10%. So looking also at a comparison of the potential debt and/or loans needed to fully fund the CIP and the Stormwater Fund, we have the three scenarios shown here. They are on the same scale as the Water and the Sewer Fund, 200 million, which is why they look so bitty. But you'll see that for scenario A, which is the blue, scenario B is green, and scenario C is the maroon color, what that profile looks like over the next 10 years. And then the summary of what those 10 years look like. So a very different profile. And then finally, for the Stormwater Fund, this is what our three scenarios look like compared to, our three 2025 scenarios look like compared to our 2024 neighbor rates. So you can see the average is about $116 for the annual bill amount, and we are below that. And Boulder is holding up the right end of the chart. They had a lot of impact during the 2013 floods, so they have some very high stormwater fees.
Why is Broomfield not on here?
It is,
Yeah.
right now it is.
Yeah.
So Broomfield right now has nothing, and Broomfield's draft 2025 is the fifth from the
Oh,
right.
there's the draft, got it.
Draft, yes. They currently have no stormwater fee, and as part of their overall significant proposed rates for 2025, they are looking at a stormwater fee. So I will stop there. This is the end of the stormwater slides. And what we will be doing is asking for your direction at the end of the presentation. I don't know if that's something that you would prefer to do now or sit on until the very end.
I'll open it to council for their thoughts, or if you want to keep going. All right, everyone wants to keep going.
All right, here we go. So the water fund. And again, we have our map of the city, so you can see that we have projects that have a specific home located across the entire city, and then those that are system-wide are listed in that upper right-hand gray box. You will see at the very top left, there's a red dot with an arrow, and that represents the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project, which is happening up in the Gross Reservoir. Again, a big theme for the water fund, we've got some big project pushes going from 2019 through 2031. And again, that same breakdown of the colors and the criticality for the CIP. So our total 2025 CIP is about $68 million, more than half of which is critical to us. And then the total for the next 10 years is almost $600 million, which is a very large dollar amount. And tight. Potential consequences of not implementing and/or deferring projects, very similar to the Stormwater Fund. We would have level of service impacts. That could include watering restrictions. That would also include slowed plan development. If we don't have consistent or reliable water, that could have some reputational impacts. And then, of course, inflation impacts for deferred projects. Again, we have a slide that shows the 2025 proposed expenses. So we do have existing debt payment from our 2022 issue. We do have some proposals for scenarios B and C. Those range from $6 million to $6.3 million. The operating budget does include one temporary position and 2 FTE requests that would start in 2026. And then our proposed CIP plan, fully funded, of $67.8 million. So you can see the range of totals there. We had brought 3 scenarios to you in August, and you asked us to come back with just the 2 scenarios B and C, so we have those here. Same format as for the Stormwater Fund. The budget book includes a combination of fee increases and rate increases. So the Water Fund does have a variable amount and a fixed amount. That variable amount for the budget book scenario is 10%, and that fixed fee of $2 a month increase is 22.43% increase. That overall forecasted revenue increase is 11.29%, and that is slightly different from what we showed you last month. It is lower from what we showed you last month. We went back in and did some looking in the models, and there was a formula error, so we have a reduced amount for this overall revenue increase. 2025 does show a $90 million debt issuance, followed by an additional $313 million over the next 9 years, and this does fund 100% of the 2025 CIP. Scenario C, which is fully funding all 2025 capital projects, has a variable increase of 12%, and that fixed increase stays the same. It is an additional $2 per month, so 22.43%. That overall revenue increase is 13.04%. That has a different debt profile of almost $86 million, and an additional $325 million needed by 2034. So both of these scenarios fund everything. One has a lower overall increase but higher debt. One has a higher overall increase and lower debt. So that's something for you to consider. Again, the impacts to single-family bills. So in scenario B, you can see the total for 2024 is $641.83. The total for the 2025 scenario is $720, and so that's an increase overall of 12.17%. And then for scenario C, it goes from $641.83 to $730 for an overall increase of 13.8%. And if you break that down even further, this is that differentiation of what a bill would look like, or what a bill impact would look like for customers who use different amounts of water. So for those customers who use 75,000 gallons of water, you can see what that impact looks like compared to 300,000 gallons on the far right. And I will give you a minute to digest that.
Councilmember Furray.
At what point do they transition from Tier 1 to Tier 2 rates with use of gallons?
Everybody gets charged Tier 1 rates from 0 to 30,000 gallons.
Okay.
For bi-monthly, and then 30 to 60, 60 to 90, 90 plus.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this one, okay. Okay, I'm going to move forward to that historic and projected water rate increases slide, similar to what we did for stormwater. So you can see here we show years 2010 through 2034, and we show what an annual revenue increase, fixed plus variable, looks like along the vertical axis. So from 2010 through 2024, you can see a variety of increases, and those are the combined increases. And then to the right of that black bar, you'll see the two scenarios, scenario B in red and scenario C in green. And then Sharon wanted to share something.
Thank you. How's Chris doing? She's doing great, right? She lives and breathes these numbers. Okay, that's not the only thing I was going to say. So, Councilmember Ambrose, you had asked a question about this graph when we showed the stormwater data, and you know, I wanted to point out it has kind of a similar trajectory to it, right? Like flat for a number of years, and then like a big increase starting in 2022 into 2023. So I want to take the opportunity to point a couple things out. One is that we're in a time when a lot of our infrastructure that was put in the 1960s to 1980s is aging out. So we've enjoyed a long period of time when the infrastructure was in good enough shape to stay operational, and we sort of run that out. And so that is happening. That is currently our status with a lot of our infrastructure, is we had a lot of good decades, and now it's time to replace it. The other thing I want to point out is that the City Council in around 2019, as part of the strategic planning work the council did, gave us direction as the staff to do master planning for water, sewer, and stormwater, and we sort of did it in that order. So we started with water infrastructure, master planning, moved into sewer, moved into stormwater. And so as those master plans were completed at the direction of council, we identified not only that we had needs, I think we knew that, but started to put specific project plans together, really get some numbers to put on those so we could do the long-range financial planning. So that's just what I wanted to say in this context, sort of help explain maybe what happened the last few years, what led up to it, why we're here, and then also, these curves are all trending down at some point, and I think this is a pretty common pattern for utilities to go through periods of heavy capital investment, and then we won't need it for a while at the same pace. So I want to point that out too. So thank you, Chris, for giving me a moment to talk. Any questions about that? Okay, all right, thank you.
I'll just say I appreciate that overview, that we're going through like a spike right now, and that things should be getting back down to probably never going to be back at zero because of inflation and ongoing costs. But it would be great, I don't know, I guess this goes out to 2034, but like how long we'll be able to, you think, after this spike, like should we be able to enjoy these improvements for the next 20 years before we're going to need a spike again or things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I think you can expect to hear more from us on that. Big projects, North Trunk Line, that's $80 million plus. We're not going to have to do that again for maybe 80 years. New water treatment plant, another one that should last us 100 years. So these are generational investments. We've been talking about the 2020s being this era of major investment that the city will be built on literally for generations. So happy to provide some more specifics as we continue our story. Thank you.
And I'll pile on to that a little bit. What you don't see in this picture, what you don't see on the one-pagers is any work to repair or replace the Ralston water treatment plant. So while we've been talking about the Arvada water treatment plant, we also have our workhorse, the Ralston plant. And that one we will be doing some thinking about and focusing on in the late 2030s, probably early 2040s. That does not show up right now. So that's why I said earlier, 3%, that's what we know right now. But if you look at the projects that are on that list, it's also important to know what's not on that list. And so when we come forward with some more information, that 3% will come back up. And to Sharon's point, we're gonna ride that wave of proposed increases to make sure that we have our systems repaired and replaced. Okay, so a similar very busy slide. This is the one that we replaced due to some math errors. So you'll see the strike-throughs and then in yellow font, the correct numbers. So you'll see for the water fund scenario B and scenario C, existing rate revenues plus new rate revenues, and those are different for each fund because of the difference in the total revenue increase. You'll see existing revenues for fixed fees and new revenues. You'll see non-rate revenues, and again, that covers everything from tapping fees, inspection fees, interest, things like that. We have system development charges on here. We do not charge those for the stormwater fund. We do charge those for the water and the wastewater fund, and so that is an average of the last several years. And then bond proceeds plus reserve funding. So you'll see that dollar amount of the issue after the total amount there. So total revenues, and then expenses are existing debt service. Again, we have that existing 2022 issue that we're paying service on. New debt service, which will vary depending on how much we issue. Operating expenses, capital improvement plan, the use of fund reserves, and in this case, we are putting money back into the reserve because we'll be issuing debt, but not spending all of it in the first year. And again, I'll show two slides with all of this information on it. Again, the expense cost allocation for an annual typical single-family water bill. So you can see for 2024, that's about $642, and you'll see the 2024 overall increase. You can see what the 0% would look like if we carried that across for 10 years. And you can see the 6 different expenses. So you can see at the very bottom in that light blue, we are currently paying debt service in 2024, and then out years. In 2025, you'll see the addition of a purple line, that's new debt service for this scenario. And then we're paying operating expenses in green. You'll see actually more of the bill going towards those high critical CIP projects in the red. and then yellow and orange. And that 2025 shows for scenario B is 11.29%, followed by 11.5, 10s for 3 years, and then 4 years, and then back under 10%. For scenario C, it looks somewhat similar. They're not that far off. Scenario C shows a 2025 total increase of 13.04%, followed by some 12s, a couple of 10s, and then we get underneath 10% sooner than we did with the scenario B profile. And again, you can see that this is how much of the bill is being covered. So we're obviously going to cover our debt, maybe not obviously. We're going to pay our debt service first. That is a requirement. And then we're going to pay our operating, and then we're going to look at capital. Again, a similar profile of what the next 10 years looks like for debt issuances or loans. So they're very similar over the course of 10 years, 403 million versus 411 million. And then our comparison with our 2025 scenarios to our neighboring 2024 rates. And my apologies, the boxes around the names are wrong. If you look at the colors, those are right. So the maroon colored scenarios are our scenario B and C. And then you will see the city of Broomfield has for a long time lived at the far left of the graph and will now be living in the mid to upper part of the graph with their proposed rates. And as a reminder, we're talking about Broomfield because they are looking at some significant rate increases on the water fund and the stormwater fund to address some repair and replacement work that has not been funded to date. So for a long time, they have not had significant increases, and they are now looking at significant increases.
I'm just curious, simply because Thornton is blocked here. I know they're going to have some significant water infrastructure upgrades since the court cases are all finally resolved. Are those funded in this? My guess is probably not.
They are probably not in this. I don't know the specifics of how much of that is actually growth related or if it's R&R related. If it's growth related, it won't show up on here because the tap fees would pay for that infrastructure. So if all of that new work they're doing, all of that new storage they're building is strictly for growth, we will never see it on this sheet.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that is the end of the water fund. So I will move on to the sewer fund. So again, a map of the city with projects where they live, and 99% of those actually 100% of those red projects are the North Trunk Line and the Central Ralston Trunk Line. And then Councilor Ambrose, you pointed out that we had something not in the city limits. That is our manhole in 76th and Sheridan. And again, for the system-wide projects, those are shown in the box on the upper right. And the overall theme for the sewer fund is that we are having big project pushes from 2019 through 2028. So again, that is that combination of interceptors that are being increased to meet plan development as well as repair and replacement. Our 2025 projects total about $36.5 million, the vast majority of which is that high critical project. And then for our next 10 years, we're looking at $172-ish million of projects. And then again, similar consequences of not implementing or deferring projects. If we looked at proposed expenses, we do have existing debt payments for that 2022 debt issue. We do have debt payments depending on the amount of the issue. Our operating budget, there are no requested, folks, no FTE requests in the sewer fund for 2025 or 2026 at this point, and our CIP plan. So you can see the range of our expenses. Again, 2 funding scenarios. We did not bring back the 0% per your direction. So you can see scenario B has a variable increase of 10% and a fixed increase of $1 per month of 23.7% for an overall revenue increase of 11.4%. That comes along with an issue of $7 million in 2025 with an additional $52 million in 2027, and that is primarily to wrap up the rest of the North Trunk Line and Central Ralston Line work. Scenario B does fund 100% of the 25 operating expenses and only funds 91% of the 25 CIP. So that would cut into our planned red colored CIP. Deferring that means that there would likely be impacts to delivering our infrastructure for planned development. So that is something to consider. Scenario C shows a variable impact of 14.5% and the fixed impact of $1 per month of 23.7% for an overall 15.40% revenue increase. That comes along with a $13 million debt issue and an additional $42.5 million in 2027. That does fund all the operating expenses and all of the 2025 CIP. A similar bill review, we look at a typical single-family bill as 4,000 gallons per month or 8,000 gallons per bi-monthly bill. You can see for the scenario B, it would be an increase overall of 11.88%. And for scenario C, an overall increase of 15.7%. Again, historic and projected rate increases. You can see across the board some very different rate increases from 2010 through 2024, and Sharon's explanation as to the variety of water fund increases stands, I'm sure, for the sewer fund, yes. And then you can see the scenario B in red to the right of the black bar and scenario C in green. Busy slide again. Up here to show you that the two scenarios, the revenues, are matching the expenses. In this case, the expenses show a need to use reserve funds. So in the past two scenarios, or excuse me, the past two slides for the funds, we've shown we're putting money back into the fund. We're taking money out of it for the sewer fund. So you'll see a use of $22.59 million and a use of $19.19 million. Again, how does this typical single-family bill reflect the expenses that are assessed against it? So you can see, again, the 0% going across the board, the rates that are needed under scenario B to fully fund the CIP for out years. So in 2025, that 11.40% would be followed by a 15, a 12, and then we get under 10% for the out years. For scenario C, we would have in 2025 a 15.40% overall revenue increase, followed by a 14, 2 10s, and then we're under 10% for the out years. The debt profile for the next 10 years, somewhat similar in amounts. And then our comparison with our neighbors' 2024 rates to our proposed 2025. We're about average, a little over for the scenario C. So that is the end of the discussion about numbers and charts and CIP. And I'm going to transition to a few slides about assistance programs, and then we are finished, and we'll take questions and ask for your direction. The last slide here is actually one final chart from earlier on in workshops. If we fully funded all of the CIP and then budget book and then 0%, where does the city's bill for everything fall? And you can see where we are for that. Okay, utility bill assistance program recommendations. So we have a few slides about this. We are recommending the following 4 things. So we will continue to, or we will start referring our residents to local and regional nonprofits for assistance. We have talked with Community Table. We are working on a partnership with them where they refer folks to us and we let people know that they too have a program that's available. I will give you a little bit of context on that. When we talked to them, they said that in 2023, they offered 4 assistance packages for a total of $1,400. In 2024, year to date, they've offered 4 packages for a total of $1,600. And their requirements are that anybody who's asking them for financial assistance must have already been a food bank client, so they have some criteria that goes along with that. We will maintain our existing programs, so we still do the hardship credit, we'll still do bill equalizations, we'll still do bill arrangements, and that's the utility billing team's purview. What we'll start doing is leveraging the existing resident rebate program customer list to offer our customers a $100 bill credit. So they've already been vetted by the finance team to meet some criteria. And we will reach out to them, send them postcards or emails, or we'll figure out a good marketing outreach strategy to help them manage their bill if they need that. For some context, this year, recently, I can't remember if it's this year or last year, and I might look to Brian if it was 854 this year or last year resident program recipients.
That's this year.
Thank you. So they had about 850 customers. So if we offered our customers $100, that's $85,400 of potential assistance we'd be offering. And then we will continue to research a roundup option on customer bills and or a Ralston House type donation assistance program. So as we mentioned in the last workshop, there are some software costs that would go along with a roundup option, check a box on your bill. We'll look at what that takes and if that's worth spending that amount of money for what we might receive, and then look at some different options with that going forward. And we would need some staffing for that, but we will come back to you with what that would take. So we are at the end of the presentation, and so we've talked about the timeline, we've recapped the information and questions you had from the workshop we did last month, and so we're looking for some direction from you on what you would like us to bring back on October 7th.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciate all the graphs and even some of the busy slides. I'm of the opinion that option C across all three programs is probably the best. It's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid of a sharp increase now, but that'll avoid increases later and is the best for the debt service as well. So that's what I would be advocating for. And on the utility bill assistance programs, it's a shame Councilmember Pfeiffer is not here because he's the one who proposed, I think he was the one who proposed the roundup idea, but I think we should not pursue that because the overhead and trying to make that happen is more expensive than just, offering a credit to folks. And then, so I'm for the 3A of offering the credit, but just to clarify that credit, it doesn't really work for renters, right?
Currently, that's my understanding, that we don't provide a hardship credit for renters. We do provide a hardship credit for renters.
Okay, so how does that work?
Debbie, would you like to share a little bit about how that works? Okay, come on down. Yes, and this is Debbie Baumgartner. She's our utilities service manager, so her team manages this entire program.
Welcome, Ms. Baumgartner.
So they would just need to provide that they were under hardship and what that exactly meant, and any financial documents that they had to back that up or substantiating information to prove that.
Okay, so we can give a hardship credit to renters if they can prove that they have income issues, but we can't help that same renter if they say, hey, I can't pay my bill. They can't access other programs.
So I think the one that you are referencing wanted an arrangement for a longer due date, and we have to have the landlord approve that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do other council members have questions? If you want to keep going, no, I don't have more stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all the remarks I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Ferre.
Yes, I'm also supportive of scenario C, understanding that we will be able to provide hardship credits for those that are unable to pay for any assistance. The roundup I also would not be supportive of, just with overhead and costs and additional staffing. The one thing that I did appreciate that you brought up was having a fee for water conservation or water security for higher tiered water use. And I think that might be a more reasonable way with lower overhead to help fund some of this hardship. So if we put a fee at the highest tier of water use, even a nominal amount, that could roll into hardship credits that we might see an increase of. And that's just also dabbling into what we're hearing from our residents around water conservation. So I think that there's a little bit of a double win here if we look at financial assistance in that lens instead of increasing it for every tier, that highest tier having just a little amount that could go into water security, water conservation, that could pay for some of that hardship and water conservation efforts. So that's how I would be supportive of the assistance, just to make sure that we have enough for hardship credits, because I imagine we will be seeing an uptick with the outward advertisement of it now that we are doing that. So that's all I have.
I see no other lights. Any, Mayor Pro Tem Moorman?
Thank you, Mayor. In regard to the scenarios, I guess I see that makes sense clearly for option C for the stormwater and for the sewer, because I think it's important that we cover all of our CIP. But for the water, I'm a little bit more torn there, and I think because it covers the CIP in both B and C, and there are just such little differences in all the different criteria that you laid out for us. And I guess the one thing that catches me the most then is the immediate increases that our residents would be paying over the next couple of years, and it seems like B kind of tampons that down a bit. And so I would almost be inclined to lean more towards B for the water, but C for stormwater and sewer.
Ms. Davis, Mr. Marriott, would you like to provide your thoughts on a recommendation? Mr. Marriott.
I would recommend you stick with the budget book recommendations. I think, you know, in a big way, what we're talking about here is only how you fund the program. It's not how big the program is. And so we're not having a discussion on that. And that's really the only thing that moves the needle much. However, everybody who's on the margin gets hurt every time we do this, and the more we raise it quicker, the more we hurt people on the margin. And so if we look at this purely from a viewpoint of what's the best for our water system or our stormwater system or our wastewater system, you know, it's easy to pick scenario C. But if you look at it from the position of someone who's on the margin, I don't think it's quite so clear. And I think we need to look at it both ways. So I would stick with scenario B in all cases, follow the budget book. And as far as trying to essentially tax or fine or fee somebody who's a higher user to give assistance to people who struggle, I completely disagree with that. I think that's a terrible idea. If you go to that top tier water users, you're just raising the rates of food in every restaurant around. Manufacturers, businesses, that's who you're then, you know, taking money from them to transfer it to somebody else. And I think that's a disingenuous way to do it. I think, you know, water ought to be based on what you're buying. And we have some tiers that make sense. And, you know, changing those around or penalizing people because their business happens to be a water user, whether they're a restaurant or something else, doesn't make any sense to me. So I would stick with scenario B in all cases. And, you know, your assistance programs, I would, you know, do the first couple and certainly wouldn't spend a bunch of money to do a different assistance program like a Roundup program.
Okay. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. It was great to see all the comparisons and how thoughtful they were. I tend to fall with Mr. Why do I forget your name? Mr. Moorman, and I like to do B for the water fund, and then again, when people are high water users, it might not all be outdoor irrigation. It could actually be that they just have a large family, and maybe they're not irrigating their yards at all. And so if we take a look at that and their water use seems to be the same month to month to month, that tells a different story than somebody like me that lives on a large lot and was required to have in-ground irrigation and Kentucky bluegrass. Ridiculous. So I don't think penalizing people who use a lot of water, or like Mr. Marriott said, businesses that are water intensive, manufacturing, certainly anybody who uses water for hygienic purposes, such as maybe all our urgent cares that we have out there. So I think that we just stay with where we are on our assistance programs, and then reevaluate in a couple of years, maybe in the next budget session. But that's kind of the recommendation that I would make.
Thank you. Okay, so one, thank you for the helpful graphs. It made the visualization very easy, and I appreciate that. So given a lot of thought to this, I tend to agree with the Mayor Pro Tem's recommendation. I like scenario C's for the sewer and the stormwater funds, but for water rates, when we look at that particular graph, the pain is not quite as spiky, and it tends to even out a little bit more over time, which spreads it out. So I'll be supporting the recommendation of the budget book for the water rates. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to be perfectly clear about what I'm bringing back on October 7th. The Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Davis, and you, the mayor, have all said yes, scenario C for stormwater and sewer, and scenario B for water. Councilor Marriott has voiced his opinion of recommendation of budget book for all three scenarios, or all three funds, and then Councilors Ambrose and Foray wanted scenario C for stormwater, water, and sewer.
Correct. So if you count to 4 on any of those one items, you've got 4 for B on water, and you got 4 for C on the other 2.
Okay. All right. And
5
we
for
will, we'll reach out to Councilor Pfeiffer and see what he agrees with, what we move forward with. Sharon, do you have a good sense of what this looks like? Okay, perfect. Because I'm fried. So, okay.
Thank you very much,
A lot of
Chris, indeed.
workshops for all of you. So we will come back to you on October 7th with first reading, and then follow that up with second reading on October 21st. And that is the same night that the budget will be coming forward as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you, team. All right, thank you, council. I will open up Ms. Haley. Any staff updates?
No staff updates. Just a reminder, we do not have council meeting next Monday. It's the 5th Monday of the month. So we'll see you on October 7th for the council business meeting.
All right, thank you. Ms. Morris?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
All right, we stand adjourned.